So this is going to be on how to upgrade the firmware on your Netduino board. There are several compelling reasons. Maybe you put a particularly horrible program on and you bricked your Netduino, or you just want to upgrade to a newer version. Or say you're running version 4.1 of the firmware on here and you want to use VB instead of C# to program your board. Well, you definitely have to upgrade to at least version 4.2 in order to have VB support on the Netduino. So to download new firmware into the Netduino, we're going to have to download some software here. The first thing you're going to use is Samba from Atmel. So let's just go do Atmel. So by the way, the little chip on the Netduino is a Atmel ARM processor. So they have this piece of software that when you completely wipe out your Netduino, you're going to need to use Samba to redown the tiny bootloader onto the chip. So what you need to do is go ahead and click. It wants you to register, so you have to give them your name, and then you can download it for free. Obviously, get the flavor that you like. We also need to download the firmware. So we probably can go to Netduino. And I like going to the forum because the firmware that I'm going to load is 4.2. And sometimes if you go to their downloads page, sometimes they try to feed you an older, more stable version. I can see they have a link here now to 4.2. But let's go back here. So right here we've got Netduino Firmware 4.2. And here you can see you can download firmware for the Netduino or the Plus. Let's go ahead and get Netduino. Save that. Alright, now we'll look in this firmware. The first thing that you're going to load onto your Netduino is this tiny booter decompressor. Then after that's done, you're going to go ahead and load in the firmware. So let's go ahead and get rolling here. We need to do a complete reset of the Netduino. So what we'll do is we'll take a jumper wire. We're going to connect it to 3 volts. And then we're going to touch the other end to this little gold square pad right over here by discrete 0. So we go ahead and just touch that to it. Nothing really happens, but once you remove power and put it back in, your Netduino is completely reset. Now that our Netduino is reset, we're going to need to open up Atmel, Samba. Go ahead and open up this Samba right here. Now, it says select your board, so you actually read these letters directly off of your Netduino. If we look on the board, the actual Atmel chip has those letters and numbers right there, so you can just take those and figure out exactly which one you have. And then it gives you a couple options, but mine knows that COM16 is what my Netduino is plugged into. If you really don't know the COM channel, you can go to your control panel. Go ahead and go to System, Device Manager, look at your ports. For some reason on my computer it says GPS camera, but it works just fine. Once we load the Netduino, you won't find it in the COM ports. It'll be down in USB. You know, there will be a Netduino down in the USB. So, if I go ahead and unplug it, you can see it went away. Go ahead and plug it in. So obviously we know that my Netduino is this COM16. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and hit connect. The first thing you do is you select this boot from flash, which is already selected for us. We're going to execute. It's very quick. And then we're going to go ahead and say enable flash access, execute. And then we're going to find the bootloader, desktop. Anyway, wherever you've downloaded this these files to. And by the way, this tiny booter does go with this version of firmware. If you have a version 4.1, you'll have a different booter. They don't mix and match. I learned that the hard way. So we're going to grab that. Go ahead and send. And it's asked if you want to lock some regions. Just say no. And it's done. Just like that. Now, we still need to load the firmware on. So we're going to close Samba. Let's go back. And obviously, I've kind of skipped this over, but I'm assuming you already have Visual Studio. You already have the .NET Micro Framework. Obviously, we're working on version 4.2. If we look, this firmware that we downloaded is 4.2 something, and it only works with the .NET Framework 4.2. That's been installed, and I have the Netduino 4.2 SDK already installed. But let's go ahead in here, and we have Microsoft .NET Micro Framework 4.2. We have tools. It opens this screen, and what we want to choose is mfdeploy.exe. Go ahead and open that guy up. Clean up my screen here. Alright. So, since we installed that tiny booter, I'm going to cycle power on my Netduino real quick. I'm going to plug it back in here. Notice it's not a COM port anymore, but if you go down to USB, lo and behold, we have a Netduino. Alright, so when we choose our device, we're going to say we want a USB, and it already finds it for us. If you want, you can ping it, see how it's doing, and it should tell you, hey, there's a tiny booter in there, and it's a Netduino. It's 4.2. Okay. So, we want to load the firmware onto the Netduino. So we're going to browse. We're going to find these files again. I'm going to go back here. It was in my downloads folder. So we want both of these files, the hex files, config and flash. Hit open. We've got them loaded in here, and then we hit deploy. And this will take a minute or so to download the firmware. Alright, now that window's done, we are done loading our firmware. So now I'm going to download a project into it and debug. Let's see if it deploys. Test out my project here. And it is working. Test out my project here. And it is working.